Hello everyone! In this video we're going to be attempting Lil Cincy's current shell challenge, which is called the Shark Shell Challenge actually, and I'm going to have that link down below. I think we have until the 21st to post this to the gallery, so all of the information will be down in the description. When I was thinking about what I wanted to do with this challenge, my first thought was to make a mansion and maybe an occult mansion, and I also considered making apartments, but I ended up realizing that this was the perfect size and width for it to be 2 townhouses. So it ends up being one for a spellcaster family on the left and one for a bunch of vampires on the right. The vampire house is much smaller, it only has 1 bedroom and 1 bathroom, but it ends up having enough space for 4 vampires to sleep. Probably more like 3 vampires because there's a coffin, a double bed and a bassinet, so maybe the baby would then sleep in the coffin. But it does have 4 spaces to sleep, and actually vampires don't really need much sleep anyway. So I decided to have these be more traditional sorts of houses, maybe sort of Victorian, but I didn't really try to copy a specific style, I just wanted it to look somewhat haunted. And so I ended up having a very dark color scheme on the right, and the house on the left is much brighter. I used all of these beautiful windows from Realm of Magic with a swatch that I had never tried before. So it's this sort of wood swatch with the gold details that is very beautiful, and I normally go for the stained glass ones, but I really wanted to use a swatch that I hadn't used before. So I ended up going with this one, and I think it looks really beautiful. And it actually has a few swatches that really match with this stuff from Crystal Creations and from Growing Together, so I was very happy with that. And I actually spent a very long time building this. I tried every wallpaper. I didn't keep most of it in the video because it was a long enough video as it was, and I did cut out a lot of the footage that I took just so that it wouldn't be that long. I think this took me about 6 hours, and sped up it was still more than an hour and a half, so I tried to trim everything that wasn't necessary, but I still tried to make this feel like it made sense. So I ended up going with this brick from Cottage Living, and I decided to use the Realm of Magic brick on the vampire house. I really love that brick, and I really tried to make it work on the Spellcaster side, but it just wasn't working. So I was glad that I was able to use it in the vampire side, and I also decided to use a bunch of these platforms in here so that I could have a roof with some flat pieces. I ended up using a bunch of stuff from the Castle State kit actually, and I thought that was somewhat surprising. I ended up going with the foundation from that pack on the vampire side, and the Spellcaster side has one from Get Together. And I also decided to use some fences from that pack just to frame that balcony a bit better. I also used the windows from vampires and one of the fences from vampires to fence in the backyard, but I was very happy that I was able to combine a few packs together because I didn't want it to look like I was just using stuff from the same pack so that it would all match. I wanted it to look a bit more interesting than that. So I ended up actually using some stone from For Rent, which was surprising. And the fence that is actually from vampires, I ended up using on the Spellcaster side just to fence in some of the areas such as this entryway, and the staircase is also from Castle State. One thing that I didn't show because I didn't realize it until I was taking screenshots was that the wallpaper in the Spellcaster side has this cool trim in the corners, except on one of the sides because there isn't 2 tiles between that corner and the bump out. So I actually ended up having to use these stones from Jungle Adventure and sizing them down and staggering them so that they would look a bit more similar to these. And I think that it looks passable. I think that I didn't do such a bad job, and you should also be able to see that on the thumbnail. But now we're going to be heading indoors in a bit. I just tried to make sure that I had an idea for the landscaping, so I added some plants and some sculptures. Some are from vampires and some other are from the Romantic Garden stuff pack, so that's what I decided to use in the Spellcaster side because it was more whimsical and magical, and it didn't look as creepy as the ones from vampires. Even though I did use the fountain from Romantic Garden in the vampire backyard because it looked kind of overgrown and it doesn't look like it would work anymore. So I really enjoyed having that like unkempt look in this side. I also made sure to have a deck so that you could step out of the house and into the backyard. And I also added a bunch of thorns and the dead rose bushes from vampires because I wanted to have a lot of contrast between these two homes. But then we're going to be heading indoors, and I first thought that I was going to have the bathroom in this corner, but I ended up deciding to have it on the other side of the house because I thought that this strange space worked better for a kitchen. I was worried about the diagonal walls because they make some very strange shadows on counters, but I ended up making this work. Since this is a house for vampires, they don't really need to cook that much, or ever. So I just added a few of these counters from vampires, which I still wanted to use because they are beautiful and they really fit because they are from the same game pack. And I ended up sectioning off these diagonal spaces and making them into platforms for a few sculptures. I am using some from vampires, but I also used one from the base game in the other diagonal section that I made. It's a sim with an umbrella and it's supposed to be like a sad sculpture. It's one from the woodworking table. And I liked it because when vampires are out in the daytime, they can use an umbrella and keep out of the sun that way, and so they don't catch fire. So I thought that maybe that could be a vampire as well. And I ended up using a very big dining room table. I was thinking of those movies where you have like those world domination meetings when they have these very big tables and you have these very like grand chairs on the end, so that's where the main vampire would sit. So I thought that made more sense than having a large living room, and so the living room is pretty small, which I think is interesting given how big the bathroom and the kitchen are. They aren't exactly big, but they could have been a lot smaller. But I really liked how the house looked in the end, and I was thinking that maybe these vampires try to pretend that they are not vampires. They try to be a bit less obvious, although some of the things that they do will still make it pretty obvious that they are vampires. So for example, in the bathroom I did decide to have some toilet paper, and I also have like some very creepy stuff out in the open. But the toilet paper is facing the wall instead of the room, so I think that makes it clear that they don't really use the toilet. And I also used this like very gothic paneling and flooring and everything everywhere, so it isn't exactly discreet, but they are trying. I also added a gallery wall of vampires, so I also added a small desk nook next to the living room, which I was very happy with. I am using the desk from Paranormal because it is an antique desk and it is very beautiful, and it's also a lot smaller than some of the other desks, so it fit that space pretty well. And it also came in a black swatch that matched the look that I was going for. I was also using a bunch of these red accents that you can find a lot of in the Vampires pack, but also in Crystal Creations, so I ended up using a bunch of stuff from that stuff pack as well. Although I did try to make sure that I was keeping these two houses pretty different, so I tried not to use so many stuff from Crystal Creations because I wanted to save it for some of these spaces in the Spellcaster side, but the couches, for example, are from there. And yeah, I tried to make sure that these vampires would have everything they needed, so there's an umbrella rack and there's also spaces to play music. I also wanted to add this beautiful mirror from Crystal Creations in that red swatch that matches these spaces so well. And since the vampires do have a hygiene need, I thought that it made sense for them to have the shower and tub combo from vampires, which of course matches everything perfectly. And then I remembered to add a mailbox and a trash can, and I also got a mailbox for the other house. I, however, didn't remember to add a fire alarm until when I was playtesting, and for some reason a fire started in the bathroom in the vampire house. I don't really know how that happened. I didn't know that was possible, so if you know and you could let me know, I would appreciate that. But yeah, I did remember to add fire alarms to both of these townhouses, which, by the way, I am going to have in the gallery, but I am not going to class as residential rentals because that's a very easy thing for you to do. And if you don't have for rent, the game doesn't let you download residential rentals, even if it does let you download stuff from packs that you don't have because of the lot type. But yeah. Anyway, upstairs we have this lofted bedroom with that double bed that I had mentioned from Vampires, and you can see that there's a very weird clipping from the roof that I tried to hide by having this very tall headboard and by not adding any lighting to that corner. I did remember to add some, not bedside tables, but the cube shelves from Crystal Creations that have that display case sort of look to them. And I just added some clutter, and I did add a light to one of these sides, so you will see that in the screenshots. And I also added these bookshelves from Strangerville. They are pretty tall, so I sized them down so that they would fit, and I also didn't show it, but I added some more decorations, some books, so they didn't look empty. And that's another thing that you will see in the screenshots. I did add some of the books from the Vampires debug and also I think the Crystal Creations debug. And I did make sure to playtest everything, so those bookshelves work and the coffin also works, but you can't woohoo in it because it's against the wall. You can sleep in it just fine, it's just woohoo that doesn't work. And now we're working on the backyard. We are adding some more landscaping and making sure that there's a nice graveyard because maybe these they overdrink and maybe some stuff like this happens, and I decided that I would have them all like crooked because maybe they didn't do the best job at it. They are amateurs and they still haven't buried that many sins in their lifetimes. So I just added some more of the landscaping from Vampires, and that's another thing that I did more of when I was taking screenshots. So you will see that I have Durian paint, but the one that I do show in the screenshots is a bit more polished. And I also made sure to have it a bit more overgrown, and of course when I was playtesting, I ended up having to move stuff around a bit so that it would all be accessible by the Sims. And now we're going to be working on this other house. I decided to have a defined entryway, which is where you are going to be finding the stairs, and behind them we have a bathroom, and so upstairs we have these 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. I cut out 2 of the bathrooms because they were very similar to the downstairs bathroom, except that they have showers instead of the shower tub combos. I ended up having to use the university shower in one of them because of how the windows were, but that's something else that you will see in the screenshots. And it was very important for me to have this library space here in the landing. There's this reading area and there's a chess table as well as a bunch of bookshelves. I don't end up keeping this chess table because I really wanted a seance table, and I was thinking that since this is in Forgotten Hollow, maybe these spellcasters don't want everybody to know that they are spellcasters instead of vampires, or even just humans, so I thought they might not want to have the seance table in a very visible space, so I ended up having this chess table outside instead, because the seance table does glow and spin around and everything, so it made sense for me to have that a bit more hidden. And I also included a small reading area with some chairs, but if you wanted to have the crystal table from Crystal Creations, you could just not have that area maybe, or maybe you could have it in a different space. I also have a desk in the living area, and I also have this smaller table in the entryway, which is another space where you could have that table if you wanted to. But yeah, now you have seen what the bathrooms look like more or less, and this is going to be the entryway where I have those broomsticks as well as some more decorations, which I will add later. But it was also important for me to have that mirror and a rug and everything, and I think that it looks very finished in the end. And in the kitchen, I really wanted it to be closed off because maybe these spellcasters do a lot of experiments in here and magic potions and everything, and they don't want them to be so out in the open, and maybe there's like some weird smells that come from the cauldron and everything. And also maybe it looks weird to have a cauldron, so I decided to block that off. And for a kitchen it has a very decent size, but since I was using a cauldron and I also decided to combine this cabinet with a counter. There ends up not being a lot of space for food prep, but it is functional. You can use the one that I have in the corner, and because of how small the space ends up being because of the cooler, I decided to also have a pedestal sink instead of having the sink on a counter. But anyway, I'm also using a large dining room table in here, and it was very important for me that every sim had a seat at the table, so there's enough space for 4 sims to live here, so I was happy that I was able to have a larger table. And I also think that the living room has a pretty decent size, so all of the sims that live here can sit at this living room. And I also really wanted for there to be a fireplace in here, because there was a chimney, and that's something that I wasn't able to include in the vampire side of this slot, even though I did try, but I ended up cutting that out because it didn't make sense to keep it in. And one thing that I really liked about this one was that I used a lot of decorations, a lot of gallery walls. I also have this bar, so I think that was a cool way to separate the living room from the dining room without having this weird gap. And I also have that desk that I had mentioned in this nook next to it. And I was also very happy that I was able to have this display case. So if you wanted to add some more magical objects or maybe some crystals, you can add them there. Even if, once again, I didn't add that crystal table, but you could also have it outside if you wanted. It shouldn't break in the rain or anything. Or maybe you could decide that you don't actually need a desk, so you could also do that. And so because I wanted to have some of these areas be free for any other collectibles, I decided to have some of these things such as the voodoo doll and these cowplant skulls and the normal cowplant on top of that furniture piece instead of inside. And now I'm just adding some more clutter, and then I remembered that I wanted to clutter up this entry table, and I just added a few plants and stuff to it. I added the fairy house from Growing Together because I thought that was cute and magical, and I also decided to add some more plants to the kitchen, as well as a mortar and pestle, some potions, and what looks like could be a jar of some more ingredients for the potions. I think these potions are very cool because in gameplay they actually have colorful fumes. So yeah, that's another reason why you might want to block off the kitchen. It looks too magical and too smelly to be right next to the rest of the living area. I also decided that I wanted to have a cat, so I added some pet balls and a scratch post, and the kitty litter ends up being outside. And I was very happy with how that worked out. I really love using that very cool archway from Growing Together that has that same swatch that a lot of these windows and stuff from Realm of Magic has, so I was very happy with that. And upstairs in the master bedroom, I decided to combine a few mirrors and to have them above this bed from Discover University. I tried using the bed from Realm of Magic, but it's too big and I didn't like the swatches, so I decided to use this one instead, and the mirrors allowed me to have some better height in this area because that's one thing that I missed from that other bed, that it really filled up the wall. And even if this wallpaper does have some pattern to it, I was using one that was so light that it wasn't very noticeable. But yeah, I just decided to have some more decorations that looked like they were personal belongings, and I also added a wand on top of one of those dressers. And now we're going to be working in the teens bedroom. I wanted to have this be slightly messy and kind of moody, but also to be very focused around plants. So there's plants in the wallpaper, there's plants in the rug, there's hanging plants from Nifty Knitting, and just a few more plants for good measure. I don't really love the curtains that come from Realm of Magic. It's just the shape and the swatches that are very weird. So I tried not to use them, but I decided that it made sense to use them in this room, and I actually do use them in the siblings room, so I think that's okay. I don't like having items that I prefer not to use. I feel a bit weird about having them, but I was happy that I was able to include them here. I also added the gallery wall from Paranormal in here, even though I have added it downstairs, but I decided to have this other poster from Crystal Creations so that it would look a bit different. And now we're moving on into the child's bedroom, which is slightly smaller, but it does have a few more functional items than the teenager's bedroom. It just worked out that way because the other one has a very strange hallway. So I ended up adding stuff to that other bedroom, like a very large mirror and little decorations and lamps in some of those areas, but it doesn't really make it a more functional bedroom than this one. This one has a bunch of toys and a functional bookcase, which the other one doesn't have, even though I added a bunch of books next to the bed because I was thinking that sim really loves reading, but they aren't very good at putting the books back into the bookshelves. And I really liked how different these two bedrooms were. This one is a lot more neutral, I suppose. It has a bunch of wood tones, but it is still like playful in a way because of all of the items that I included in here. I also included an owl backpack, which I ended up swapping for the other owl backpack that I have in the teenager's bedroom because it felt like it made more sense. This one is a bit bigger, so I decided that it made no sense for the teenager to have such a small backpack. And so that's what I did, and I also made sure that this other backpack that does work as a dresser would be accessible for Sims to plan outfits and everything. And now we're working outside. We are adding a bunch of this landscaping. I also added that kitty litter, and I hid that behind a fence, which is this fence from vampires. I really love how I was able to use this fence from Romantic Garden with the vampires fence, and it's very nice when you have swatches that actually match in the Sims. They don't always do that, and I really liked using this landscaping from Romantic Garden because it looks a bit more whimsical than some of the other landscaping that we have. And I am also using these like purple mushrooms from Realm of Magic, so I think that it still is very obviously a Spellcaster house, and I also really enjoyed how colorful I was able to make this outside. And I also cut out a lot of that landscaping because it was all very similar. I was doing the same things in all of these corners, so I didn't keep all of that in. And I also liked having that large stone area here in the backyard with these benches from Romantic Garden as well, and the fountain. I also have the wishing well from that pack and some more decorations from that pack. But I also really wanted to have the bunnies and the birds from Cottage Living just to make this more interesting and so that they would help with gardening. And then I decided to grab some of the plasma fruit trees and the crystal trees from the gallery because they made sense for both of these houses to have the specific magical trees that they would get some use out of. And then I just added some pathways with terrain paint, which I then filled in with these debug stones from the base game, which I think this is the best item. Well, these are the best items from debug because they are base game, so they are free, and we don't have anything like this from any of the packs really. So if you want to have these very cool custom pathways, you can make them with debug, and I think that's even cooler than having like free landscaping, even if the debug landscaping is so nice. But yeah, now I'm just adding some finishing touches. I cut out the rest of the pathways because they were all the same and they were taking me a very long time. Then I decided to have this gardening table as well as some cute outdoor lighting, and that's going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to download this, it is going to be up in the gallery under my ID, which is Vania, and I will also have that link down in the description for you, as well as the original shell, so if you wanted to try it, you could. And yeah, now I'm just going to be adding some more details to the rooftops, as well as some fireflies, just so that it looks a bit more magical at night. And that's it for the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.